Well, good afternoon, folks. This is Reverend Ann here with Reverend Joanne, and welcome to Holy Grounds, Coffee and Theology. So before we begin, if you don't already have a cup of coffee or a beverage, I invite you to grab one as we talk about our scriptures for this weekend. And I'll read a version of our gospel this week. This is from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 22, verses 1 through 14. And it's a continuation of what we read last week. And so Jesus is talking to the Pharisees as he's reading this. Once more, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again, he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad, so the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" Wow, that's quite the passage that we've got today. I've wondered, Joanne, have you ever been invited to a special occasion or an event or had an event, invited somebody where they made light of it?
Well, I do have a friend, Anne, who likes to make attempts to get together from time to time. She's a person who likes to be spontaneous, and the invites always sound great. But then there's something at the last minute always that this particular friend comes up with something, or something better maybe has come along. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it always feels like a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah.
Because often that person has made the initiative and then takes it back. So, it's something that after a while you begin to wonder, well, is this a pattern, or,
right.
How do we continue on, keeping this relationship, and being able to see each other and make plans when inevitably they fall through.
Yeah.
As for myself, I can think of one instance where it wasn't so much an invitation to a social event, but it was a professional, educational requirement that I needed to complete, and I needed to apply for. And the first go round, I didn't make it, and I had to go back for a second go round. And I looked at that as an invitation, because it was part of my education and formation at a certain point in my career.
Mhm.
And it felt something, it was something that I felt very called to. And yet the invitation at that particular time wasn't quite open to me. So I
Ah.
had to wait for a different time.
Mhm. Mhm. But you stuck with it.
I stuck with it.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
did stick with it.
Yeah, I think that's important. When I think about this passage of scripture, um, it can almost sound, that God is, you know, going to take back an invitation that God might give us, and yet, um, this parable, or actually, really, it's an allegory of the nature of God. If we're not careful, we can really confuse that. Because when I think about this passage with God extending an invitation, um, God doesn't take the invitation back. It's up to those who are invited to accept. And so for me, that's really powerful, and something that sometimes might be quite different from your friend who extends an invitation and then cancels or doesn't show up. And that, in fact, is certainly not the nature of God as revealed in Scripture. God continues to reach out over and over and over again, and usually it's our rejection of God that results in us not having kind of this fullness of life.
That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, last week in our small group,
Hmm.
we were talking about steadfastness
Yeah.
and God's faithfulness to us.
Hmm.
And I think that is, this is a really good example of that, where it may seem that this passage has a lot of harshness to it,
Hmm.
but that it is a continual call that we may receive. We may not always be open to receiving it.
Hmm.
Um, I think of the Anglican theologian Sam Wells, and he writes a great chapter about improvisation,
Yeah.
and how when people are doing improvisation, sort of like we are right now,
Hmm.
the idea is that one person is offering an invitation to the other person,
Yeah.
and that is what conversation and exchange is. It's a series
Hmm.
of invitations to participate in something together.
Hmm.
And so I always think about that idea that we're offering each other invitations to participate in community
Hmm.
and as members of a family and a faith community, and that God is doing the same thing with us.
Right.
It's a continual invitation
Hmm.
and education that we may not always hear, we may not be ready,
Right.
but it's always there.
Hmm.
It's
What
always.
struck me about this as well, in the passage, it says that slaves went out and they invited um, both good and bad to the wedding feast. And it just reminds me that it doesn't matter to God whether we're perfect or not, that we're all invited with all of our warts. And then at the end of the passage, it talks about there was somebody there who didn't have the appropriate wedding garment. But it struck me, if people were being called off of the streets, that the king provided them wedding garments as they came in the door. Because if they were invited off the streets, they wouldn't have a wedding garment at right then and there. And then if we use the idea that wedding garment might be clothing ourselves in love, that's something that we choose to put on, and he offers that to us as part of um, the invitation. And I think we get some of that in our letter to the Philippians that we hear this week. But that again, it's our choice whether we want to be clothed in love, or putting on something else that may in fact cause us great distress. That wailing and gnashing of teeth sometimes we think of God causing that, but again, it comes to choice. Is that when we're separated from God, there is in fact darkness that we go into. So there's just so much in this particular parable that is just so rich. So what do you think this parable has to say about our relationship with God?
Well, I do think it is a very striking story that makes us stop and think, just because of all of the action and the sort of at times some harshness, and that it is an allegory that gives us the chance to use our imaginations with all of the rich language and the rich descriptions. When you talk about the person who came in off the street and was given a wedding robe, I think perhaps that person may not have been ready to make that change. So in essence, that person was really being asked to take off the thing that they had, that they were accustomed to wearing,
Right.
and putting on something else.
Yeah.
In effect, becoming a different person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you said, the wedding robe was given to the guests by the host. Some other, my Bible commentary that I have on my lap here says that they may not have required a wedding robe of guests that were plucked off the street, but in either case, it says something about that person's readiness to change and that person's readiness to take on a different life.
Yeah.
That's really what I think this is about.
Mm-hmm.
And that we might also think about the robe and its relation to baptism. And I wonder if that might have caught the attention of Matthew's audience, and really underscoring the importance of baptism as
Right.
entry into the life of Christ that is important to Matthew. And that that is a way to reinforce that we make a significant change when we take our baptismal vows,
Right.
the rite of baptism, when we get married. All of those are times in our lives where we make significant changes in ourselves and our identity, and that we really are making a choice before God. So I think what it says about God is, again, that we are invited to a wonderful banquet, which is full of love and celebration. It may indeed have some rough parts.
Yeah.
And it may have some parts that cause us to make difficult decisions. But I think that is true of our lives with God.
Right. And it's really a journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
what about you, Anne?
Yeah.
Do you have a thought about God in this story?
Oh, just that I think of God as, just offering this incredible invitation to us all the time, and is always ready and willing to hear us say yes. And it strikes me that in the letter to the Philippians that we're going to hear this week, Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. The Lord is always near. And I just think it's lovely. And we think about what we put on at baptism, whatever is pure, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pleasing or commendable. Those are all the things that I think God offers us and invites us to live into. So, well, Joanne, thank you for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Anne.
I look forward to hearing your sermon on Sunday.
Me too.
All right. We'll see you all soon. And friends,
Okay.
Thank you for joining us, and God bless you all. Bye-bye.